Hi, this is Jen from the Hillsborough Public Library. We are back after watching Explorers on Kanopy, and I'm here with two of my coworkers. Why don't you guys introduce yourself?
I'm Brendan, and I am returning. We got someone new with us today.
Yes.
I'm Elizabeth, the newcomer to your group, and I also work at Hillsborough Public Library.
Yeah, and Elizabeth is the other half of our current sci-fi fantasy collective at the Hillsborough Library, along with Jen. So we thought she would be a perfect pickup for this movie review session we're doing.
Yeah, you've probably heard my voice on some of the other podcasts we've done.
Yeah, she's one of our regulars.
Yay!
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 So we decided to forego a warm-up this time around because I feel like we got a lot to get to today. We watched Explorers, and it was a crazy ride for me. Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll kind of introduce the movie, go through it, and then at the end we'll talk about what our impressions were of the overall film, and I'm sure we'll have some interesting takes on it.
Sounds good.
But this was Explorers, and it came out in 1985 amidst a bevy of what I would call adolescent or teen adventure movies, mostly boys. But like in the mid 80s, it seemed to be a thing. It kind of got kicked off with, say, E.T. maybe, would be my guess, like in 1982. But a lot of Spielberg influence.
Oh, it does have a similar feel.
Yeah, to E.T. definitely. And when I was looking at the IMDb page for Explorers, noticed a few things. So, like, it was interesting that it was Wolfgang Petersen was supposed to direct originally, but he did not get a chance to do it because he demanded the film in Germany, where he filmed a year before Neverending Story, which is another one of those boy adventure films from the mid 80s.
Wow. It's hard to imagine him directing this movie. It has such a different feel, than the Neverending Story. You can tell, it has almost like a European feel to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this feels not European. It ended up in the hands of Joe Dante, who the year before, in '84, had done Gremlins, and would later go on to do Gremlins 2, Burbs, and Inner Space, which are good movies. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't remember Burbs or Interstate. The Burbs.
I have not seen either of them. So
out of those three movies, I like Burbs the best. I loved Gremlins. I saw it in the theater when it was released, and I really loved it. But I watched it not too long ago, and honestly, it didn't really hold up for me, to be honest. So I think he has a tone. I can definitely tell. But The Burbs is a good movie. If you guys haven't seen that, you probably should watch it.
Yeah, I vaguely remember The Burbs and it being kind of silly-ish, kind of horror thing.
Right.
Yeah, so anyways, Joe Dante is doing this, and I got really excited at the beginning. Jerry Goldsmith did the music, and he's one of the greats in my book. He had done Alien, a bunch of Star Trek movies, which is probably why he got hired on for this, and my favorite film score of all time, Rudy. But it made me think that, like, all these 80s adolescent adventure movies had distinct, memorable soundtracks, and so that's probably why they hired Goldsmith to come in and do the music. But I was not impressed with this film's music.
It's not memorable. It's not memorable, that's for sure.
Yeah, and when I think of like Goonies or Back to the Future or Last Starfighter, which all came out around 85, 84, those kind of movies, I always think of the music, but not this one. Just didn't have anything that landed for me.
Yeah, as soon as you said music, I was trying to think of a moment when the music, except for like one very specific scene in which I do not think the music was created for the film. It was taken from a different clip. That there was anything particularly distinct about it that I can recall, actually.
Yeah, so kind of a disappointment there, even though I love Goldsmith as a film composer. But anyways, at the beginning I was getting excited seeing his name, and then of course the actors involved. Just a quick little trivia: this was the first feature movie for River Phoenix and Ethan Hawke, so this is the very beginning of their careers. And I didn't realize that River Phoenix is from Madras, Oregon.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that either, I don't think.
I did know that. I was a big River Phoenix fan. When I was in high school, I actually had his poster in my locker, so I knew a lot about him. I was a fan.
It's pretty awesome. And then, yeah, of course, his brother is Joaquin.
Yep.
So, but yeah, this was their first movie, and just one more interesting tidbit I learned from the IMDb page was that this movie was never finished, and well before it was wrapped up and done, the production company said we're just going to throw it out in theaters. So what we saw was not the intended finished take of the movie, and there's probably reshoots and all sorts of stuff that the director wanted to do. So we'll keep that in mind too when we come to our review part of the podcast. So here we are, explorers.
Awesome. Let's go.
Well, I would say that this film has a pretty classic opening. For you guys, I did not grow up in the 80s, but it feels like they all sort of start the same with older sci-fi movies, in that you have sort of the nerd crowd coming into school and all the attendant things that are required to be talked about, bullies and homework and books and things like that.
Yeah, I was kind of struck by how much influence this kind of setup had on what became Stranger Things too. I was thinking that the whole way through the opening kind of scenes.
Yes, particularly for me, the walkie-talkies when they were calling each other in that early scene. The film directly begins with a dream sequence that essentially kicks off the entire film.
What did you guys think of the special effects there when in the dream sequence, the circuit board? Did you guys have any thoughts about that?
I just wrote down Tron.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Tron.
The first few seconds, I really wasn't sure what was happening because we were just drifting past a weird green mountain that was kind of unformed. And then we see like the circuit board laid out before us. And I was like, oh, we're going somewhere good. So it was definitely interesting seeing the older computer effects in place.
Yeah, mid-'80s, it was probably pretty cool scene to watch, but yeah, I was like, oh boy. And the flying through the sky and the clouds, that definitely reminded me of Neverending Story from the year before, like how it kind of began too. So yeah, it seemed a very typical kind of way to start one of these kind of movies.
Yes.
Exactly. I felt the same way.
And you sort of get the sense that this has been happening. The main lead, who is Ben, I do not remember his last name. Let me look it up. Not super relevant. But there's Ben. There's the three main crew, which we meet throughout the next 20 minutes of the film or so, as everybody's introduced, is Ben, Wolfgang, and Darren, who unfortunately the entire time I thought was Derek right up until the very end. But Darren is the other character.
He's kind of a Derek, I would say. So
yeah.
You're not wrong.
Was there anything in the opening, when you said it reminded you of Stranger Things, was there anything else in the opening that kind of brought that on?
The school scene and the bullying. It seems like every 80s movie or every movie that tries to be an 80s movie has got to have the bully scene in there every single time.
Yeah, and then they have to establish like the hierarchy of the nerds versus the rest of the kids in the school. I think that's just exactly what Stranger Things was going for. And so clearly we're in a very tropey movie here.
I thought Darren's character, who we meet when he protects Ben from being punched by another bully. Wolfgang has already left for the day at this point to return to what we find out is his lab in the next scene. I thought Darren's character was sort of interesting because he wavers a lot in the film between being very technically competent and then also playing like this sort of laid back, too cool for school kind of fellow.
I don't think it gets much more laid back than Darren. I mean, Darren is very laid back.
That's true.
I wrote down he seemed like he was like in his 30s, and not just like his super deep voice, but he's just like very like calm, collected, and I know they try to establish kind of he has home issues going on and stuff like that, but he seems to be pretty well grounded. I don't know, so he seemed much older. I did like his character though.
He had a
Yeah,
dirt bike too. He rode a
which
dirt
he
bike home
built.
from school. I know. Come on, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think he's definitely more competent than he'd like to let on in terms of
Hmm.
doing things. I think that was part of it, and he tries to come across like he's not interested or doesn't like to do that kind of stuff. But I think when he does, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely. I think one of my most favorite scenes in the movie comes next when we go to Wolfgang's lab. Because for me, without getting into too much of a review yet, part of this film was its side characters, was the absolute charm for me. And we get to meet Wolfgang's large and very busy family, who I believe are um, German scientists, is sort of the feel that you get upon meeting them, though it's not super ever clarified who his parents are.
Yeah, I love how it's kind of like you just get a sense for what's going on by the feel of it. No, they don't ever actually explain like how many kids there are, or where these people came from, or what they do for a living. It's just kind of they just drop you in the middle of this crazy family.
That's kind of interesting that you were just saying. I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name, but the director of the Neverending Story, his name was Wolfgang, and the main one of the main characters' name is Wolfgang, and they're German, and he's also German. That's kind of interesting. Since he didn't end up directing the movie.
I thought that when I was reading the name off. But I don't know if how much of a connection there was. That wasn't explained on IMDb. So
No.
But yeah, the Muellers.
I think it's in the film. It said kind of both ways, but Mueller is the one that I think is said most often.
Gotcha. Yeah, but it's pretty cool family because I have no idea how many kids there were. They all look the same and they're just running all over the house, which I thought was kind of a fun element. But then you got the two parents, which were these total that guy kind of character actors, both the mother and the father. So the father
James
was
Cromwell.
James Cromwell. That'll do, pig.
That's it. Yes.
Babe.
I was hoping
Okay.
somebody would mention Babe. That's really the only thing I've seen him in.
What about Star Trek First Contact? He's Zephram Cochrane.
Yes. And that Star Trek First Contact is, my opinion, the greatest of all the Star Trek films. So
I love that movie.
I have to confess, I don't think I've seen that many of the Star Trek.
Well, if you're going to watch just one or two Star Trek films, you should watch that one. I think it's very good. But yeah, he plays one of the lead characters in that film. And then Dana Ivey, she just has a very recognizable face. And so if you bring up her IMDb list, she's in a ton of stuff. So I thought, yeah, it was kind of cool to see them as the parents, and then just the whole family dynamics was pretty fun. And the boy who was eating the cereal through his stupid Halloween mask, it was a pretty good moment. I guess one of the kids is Taliesin Jaffe from Critical Role, but I was trying to find out which one because he was billed high on the casting list. So I know he comes from a very Hollywood family. Like his grandfather was a big film writer and stuff like that. So maybe he kind of just got the role because of that, and so they demanded that he be billed pretty high on the acting list. But yeah, I don't know which kid he was. So I like to think that he was the kid eating the cereal.
Is that the one that was throwing the food at the boys when they sat down at the table? Okay.
But yeah, so there's like 10 kids running around, and then they eventually go down into the basement to do some research.
And the mouse, you guys, what did you think of the mouse? That was pretty.
I loved
cool.
The mouse. I was infinitely charmed by it.
And then it's like after the boys see the mouse and he's pushing the buttons and the different words are coming out with the synthesized voice. As they go kind of away, I was still kind of hearing what the mouse was saying, and I was kind of chuckling to myself because there was some kind of, I don't know, naughty things that the mouse was saying. So I thought it was funny.
The mouse said naughty things?
Oh yeah. After they walked away from the mouse and they were kind of looking at the sci-fi novels and stuff, you could still hear the mouse pushing the buttons in the background and different words coming out.
Oh, it's funny. I didn't catch any of that, but then you have to think that they programmed the buttons to say naughty things. I was going to say,
that's funny. Wolfgang's lab in general, though, is I really loved the imagery of walking into that room because it looks like an attic where somebody's been doing scientific experiments. So that the mix of science and just random background clutter was really appealing.
It caused me so much anxiety when they destroyed the lab later, all that stuff just gets smashed up. I was just like, oh god.
Me too. Oh my god.
I don't know. It was just so all that cool stuff and just seeing it ruined.
The worst part for me was those classic sci-fi novels that
I
got
know.
like a hole straight through them, and then his mom's canned goods, like she'd
I
spent who knows how
know.
long harvesting and canning this stuff, and it just in 1 second it's completely destroyed.
I will say the
Yeah.
consequences for the youth in this film is pretty light overall, and that was one of the scenes that really drove it home.
Yeah, they don't. There's no repercussions for anything they do
Yeah.
anywhere in the film, so I agree.
But this is perhaps where the film really starts to take off, and it's when the science behind it is a little fuzzy to me, but essentially Ben is beamed a computer chip from space, like into his dreams, and then Wolfgang constructs it to reality. Darren is here at this point just as kind of a tag along, and they decide Wolfgang has hooked it up to his computer, and they're going to turn it on and see if it does anything. And boy, does it! What did you guys think of the special effects for the following craziness?
Well, so as far as like the special effects go, in the first 2/3, it's mostly this bubble thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I thought it was kind of fun.
Did you think it was like a force field or like an electromagnetic? I was trying to like, what is this? I couldn't articulate because I don't really know much about that type of thing.
Yeah. I didn't. I was guessing force field of some kind. But honestly, magic science bubble.
Right, because you can't look too closely at how this could even happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's not really a lot of science behind it or anything that you could really explain.
Yeah, it doesn't try to. There's a lot of technical jargon, but for those who are worried that this is a hard science film, it is indeed not. And essentially, there are various tests that go on to see what the bubble can do. Apparently, when it goes fast, it can move through everything, as they find out. We were talking about the destruction of the underground lab is pretty thorough following this.
Seems like it's so dangerous. Like they don't even consider like the fact that they could just go flying through someone's head or something as it runs through the neighborhood. I was just like, oh gosh.
I was thinking of that too as it was zipping around the basement or whatever, going right past them. I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is like a bullet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just flying around the room.
It's just ricocheting everywhere. So it's like there's the fact that they don't seem to care. Seems like the stakes are never that high anywhere in this movie for anyone. Like they're not worried about anything. At some point, like the computer is on fire and they just kind of walk away from it. I was just like, oh, put out the computer. Random side note that on the IMDb trivia page for this lab was just to get the screen to show the text that they have it show in the imaging. They had to use like a $40,000 computer that weighed about 200 pounds just to get those little displays on the screen. So that kind of places it in terms of time and place for the technology about it.
Yeah. I actually have a couple of things. This will lead us to our next scene. But at one point in this film, Wolfgang pats his computer and says, "This is just 128K," which made me laugh really hard when I saw that, because that's like compared, I believe he was talking about its memory. And if you compare that to computers today, which have like terabytes of data, the idea that 128K could do anything that this computer does throughout this film is astonishing and hilarious.
And then when they're able to pack it up into the mountains,
yes,
and
just
and
hike around
thinking,
with this computer.
Like,
exactly.
what are they powering it with? Was that a 9-volt battery? Is that what? I don't understand. There was a 9-volt battery.
It wasn't attached to anything. It just sat in a little box inside the thing. You're just like, this is what's powering it. You're like, oh.
Holy.
So then they go to the mountains for further experimentation. The boys essentially figure out that it can travel through pretty much any material, not just the air, but also the earth, which I believe is where the inkling of going to space, which is, of course, the main gist of this film goes. But before they go there, they realize that they have to build something for them to sit inside the bubble. Otherwise, where will their computer sit? Cue Darren's usefulness, and a lot of his character plot comes in the next bit, where they go to the junkyard scene. I feel like as I was watching this, I was like, there's sort of two montage scenes that are very popular in cinema. And one of them is the makeover scene, and the other is the junkyard scene. And I adore both. But the junkyard scene is vastly appealing in that there's all sorts of interesting stuff. Before that, though, they have a part of it, of course, is that they find an old carousel ride and have to haul it back in hilarious hijinks to a creek bed, I think, which is where they spend most of the film for the next 40 minutes of it or so, is constructing their creation.
They have a building montage kind of like interspersed with them falling asleep in class because they're staying up all night making the tilt-a-whirl into a spaceship.
I think it was really, I think if I had seen this film when I was like 10 years old, this scene would have been the one that like made it for me in this film, because as soon as I saw the spaceship, my inner 10-year-old was like, oh my god, I have to go build one just like it right now. Because I recommend any of our viewers or listeners at least go look up the spaceship, because from a kid's point of view, it's very, very cool and is built out of all sorts of stuff you could find in like your garage. I was worried that they were welding without much face covering, though, that they spent a great deal of the film playing with power tools, but you know.
And what about the christening scene that also happens right then?
Yeah, drinking the beer and then trying to smash the bottles. Yeah, that wouldn't fly these days probably, but.
And then they christen it the Thunder Road, which I don't know about you, but whenever I like Bruce Springsteen, but when I hear Thunder Road, I think of Grease.
Is that a Grease song too?
Well, that's where they do their racing, where Danny Zuko and
Nikki
take their car, and that's Thunder Road. Yeah, they're gonna do the race.
I think of Thunder Road, and I think of like, I think they used to like smuggle like moonshine over Thunder Road, was where that came from. And so
really?
every time, yeah. So I mean, there's an old song that talks about that, but so whenever I hear Thunder Road, that's unfortunately where my mind goes, instead of like street racing. So, but I guess they had beer in the scene, so it all holds together, right?
I guess that this was a Bruce Springsteen reference, which it didn't even occur to me at first, but yeah.
Yeah. Actually, you know, at this point, I don't 100% remember what the next scene is.
They take it for a spin, right?
Yeah, they go
that's
around,
right.
kind of create havoc around the town.
Oh my gosh, the drive-in. So I feel like a lot of these films have to have a drive-in scene, which I appreciate. This film is pretty fun because it has tons of references to much older science fiction throughout, whether it's novels or comics or old films and stuff. Which
I find that kind of strange. Like, it seems like in the mid 80s, they would be referencing more recent kind of sci-fi instead of going back to the 50s or whatever. Or
yeah,
they harken back to the sci-fi from 30 years prior to when this film was released, more than like talking about Star Wars or or some other stuff. They really kind of go out of their way to avoid talking about Star Wars, even though, odd piece of trivia here, the captain of the movie that's going on at the drive-in, his name's Starkiller, and that was the original name for the Skywalkers, was going to be Starkiller. So they do make
that's
like kind of
why it sounded familiar.
little
I was
references.
trying to figure out, I was like, have I heard of Starkiller? Why does that sound so familiar?
So that it does make it in there. And then in the junkyard, he does play with the gas mask and a little lightsaber kind of, and does a Darth Vader thing. But it was just like, it struck me as odd that none of the references like were from the past 10 years. They all went further back than that.
Yeah.
Joe Dante is, I guess, famous for being like a super big fan of like animation and, I don't know, classic different cartoonists and stuff. And I don't know if that's part of it, because if you notice, like thrown around places, there'll be like Huey, Dewey, and Louie comic books and stuff like that. And I don't know, the aesthetic is kind of all over the place when it comes to, like you said, there's like classic sci-fi, but then later on there's some things that do kind of remind me of Star Wars. So it's kind of just all over the place.
Yeah, maybe it was just, the director's own personal things that he enjoyed that he put into this, rather than accurately represent what would be influencing a kid in 1985.
Yeah, it definitely had much more of a pulp space fiction feel to me than anything that was more like Star Wars.
But I guess the drive-in movie also, the reason like there was like the delay in the dialogue, like so that made you think
I
it was
noticed
dubbed, was that there was a lot of apparently Italian Star Wars knockoff films during that time period, and so it was kind of a take on those cheap Italian redos of Star Wars that were being made.
That's hilarious. I love knowing that, because I assumed that they had just dug up some older film, but the idea that they built this for this film, actually, that's amazing. I like that.
Yeah, Star Killer is Robert Picardo.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
His first appearance in the movie, he comes back later as something else. But yeah, Robert Picardo was the Doctor in Voyager?
Yes.
Star Trek Voyager?
Star Trek Voyager.
He has sort of like a golden mohawk and like some face paint
no shirt
on. So I did not recognize him as Star Killer. But that's really funny. I enjoy that.
Yeah. I've never seen Voyager, but I do remember his appearance in Deep Space Nine, and I do not like his character. So I don't know if he comes back and becomes a better character in Voyager.
I love him in Voyager.
Voyager, side tangent for a second here.
Go for it.
Voyager is wonderful and one of my personal favorite Star Trek things, but definitely his character growth is a strong part of it. So if you do not like his early character, you are not alone in that, I think.
Okay, good. Well, I will be watching Voyager when I'm done with DS9, so
perfect.
That's good.
Let us know
what
you
look forward
think.
to. So anyways, they destroy the drive-in.
Yeah, back to the film we actually watched.
Lab. There's so many things blowing up and destroyed that don't get referred to or they don't go back to later. They just destroy stuff and move on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think
there's
there's
thousands of dollars of damage, but oh well.
Yeah, there's definitely like a casual reference. Like, I think they were going to tear it down anyway. I think I heard that. And then they like move on. There is, at this point, one of the, I would say, more dropped plot points overall, in that at one point they fly past a helicopter, and one of the helicopter pilots almost sees them. And it has this sort of like, oh no, the military or the sheriffs or the cops, I wasn't quite sure what their role was.
I think later you see sheriff clearly, so I think it's just the sheriff's office helicopter.
Oh, okay, the sheriff's office. But some sort of like authoritative threat is now like aware of their presence, that only lasts for, I would say, a little bit of the film. I don't want to, we can get to that scene later, but
yeah, I thought this so weird. Like they finally at this point I was like, okay, so stakes are being
raised,
established now,
right?
at this point.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, so now they have a race against time or whatever they have to do. It's so funny that it just goes away.
Yeah, definitely.
And in such a weird way too. Like, so Dick Miller plays the sheriff's office, or the sheriff, I guess. He's totally like a cheap version of Harvey Keitel. That's kind of what I was thinking. I know he was in Pulp Fiction and he's been in other kind of comedies too, but
he was in
he's a very
Gremlins.
that guy.
He was also in Gremlins. So
he reminded me a lot of Tommy Lee Jones of these time periods.
Yeah, he has a very grizzled looking face. And so I thought, yeah, he was going to be established to be the villain. But like when we get to the point where he finally catches the kids, he's just like, you go for it. Like, I was just like, what?
Yeah.
He goes, cheers them on. It was such an odd turnaround. There was just 5 minutes where things actually seemed to matter. And then for some reason, and that might be part of like the unfinished movie, like didn't have a way to kind of get a chance to wrap up some of these things. But
maybe he had been like, since he was a kid, or he had these same dreams, and when this happened he was like, yes, and then he wanted to be involved in it in some way. But then like I just got the feeling when they took off and he watches it, he just looks, I don't know, I just felt sad for him. It's just like he wanted to be part of it and he wasn't able to.
Yeah. What he shouldn't have been doing is like creeping around and there were boys in the middle of the night going, you were in the UFO, and like he has nothing like showing that he's a cop or anything. It's just like,
yeah,
it's like,
just like, I stole your coat, but trust me. Like,
yeah,
a little
total creeper.
I feel as though Ben, I think, is the character whose coat he finds, so pretty good reason not to trust him.
Right. Ben had his name and address inside of his coat.
Yes. It was one of the
Smart.
Yeah, it was definitely handwritten. There was a lot of stuff in this film that I liked, how it emphasized how much they were kids. Like the drawings all looked very like they were actually drawn by kids and things, and I thought that was all a really nice touch throughout the film. Sometimes it'll be in these films, they'll like whip up a technical chart and it looks like it's been professionally made, and there's something kind of funny about that too. But this was very cute overall.
So did you guys enjoy that the day after the cop in the helicopter sees the flying saucer, like that the newspaper the next day had the UFO sighting article was there, but right above it in bigger font was the city council votes on library funding.
I know.
No, I didn't see that. Oh my god.
It was the one library moment in this movie, so I was like, oh, that's more important than the UFO sighting in this local paper.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
It is more important.
I do feel like at this point, so we're about to get to our actual space adventures. There's a little bit more technical stuff they have to work out. Like some of the kids briefly get cold feet. Before we leave, I do feel like we need to mention Ben's giant crush on this girl, only because it comes back throughout the film. I feel terrible suddenly. I can't remember her name.
Laurie Swenson.
There you go.
Swenson, yeah.
Laurie, and I only mention it because it's an on-running thread throughout the film that does come back slightly later. It's mostly just a series of conversations about how much Ben is into Laurie and how much the others are not.
Yeah, they were using the machine to like sneak peek into her room at night.
Yeah,
like, kind of creepy 13-year-old boy things.
A few things that didn't age super great, and that was maybe one of them. But it's mostly pretty harmless for parents who are listening. Anyway, if we continue on, at this point they are fully ready for their first space flight, and fully stocked with all the snacks and oxygen that you might need, which are of course the only two things. At this point, they have found that if they go into space, the computer somehow receives messages through the chip that is installed that will take over and navigate them wherever they need to go, to whoever sent this dream chip. So they zip through space. Again, just slightly ominous. You get this spaceship appears. You get the wonderment of space moment. And then
they're here.
Exactly. That part actually creeped me out.
That's
I was like, oh no.
Oh my gosh.
That was a hard eye roll for me when he says that, but
and then they essentially get, sucked into the ship, tractor beamed, if you will. And then we have this great scene where their ship is hauled in, it opens up, but like no one's there to greet them, so they start exploring the spaceship. It's almost like a maze. Somebody, I think, makes a reference to, we're mice in a maze, they're testing us.
It looks like a boiler room. It's got like pipes and smoke and stuff everywhere.
It felt kind of like if Hayao Miyazaki's boiler rooms and Escher like had a baby, it would be like this very strange, things don't always make sense, and there's doors that open into weird spaces. But it was lots of that fog ice everywhere, ice fog.
And once again, I was like, wow, this seems really, really dangerous and horrifying, and the boys don't seem to like feel the same way. Like, come on, kids.
Yeah, they're like, this is cool. Until they get separated. Maybe after they get separated, they get a little...
And we're starting to get a little bit of like Ethan Hawke's character getting a little disillusioned with what he thought would be happening. Like he seems very confused by the sniffing robot.
Yeah.
Which was weird.
That robot reminds me so much of a spider droid that is in Return of the Jedi. And also in Return of the Jedi is, the eye that comes out and looks.
So maybe some more Star Wars references there.
Yeah.
Without explicitly saying it.
Yeah.
I will say that that robot is definitely one of the more interesting uses of CGI, I think, in the film. I would say.
Yeah, I like this whole kind of running around the spaceship trying to see what's going on. Like, I like how that was set up and established. So I think they did a good job. So then we have a jump scare with the aliens.
I know, right? So then the moment comes when we finally start interacting with the aliens. Ben, throughout this film, I would say, has really been perhaps the heart of this adventure. He doesn't have, I would say, as much to contribute technically as Wolfgang or Darren. But and at one point, one of my favorite lines in this whole film, Wolfgang's like, "Why would you dream something like this?" And Ben's just like, "I guess I'm just that kind of guy." And like they never talk about it. And
I know,
that
exactly.
line cracked me up.
It was really funny. Yeah, that was a good one. And the way he said it was just
exactly.
Like, I guess I'm just that kind of guy.
Just the supreme really casualness. But he's really the heart of it all, you know. He's definitely the character who's like driving the mission forward to like go into space. Every time there's a setback, he's like, "It doesn't matter. We're just gonna go back." And he's like, "But it's space." So it's fitting.
He has none of the skill and all of the enthusiasm.
But he's definitely appropriate that he is the first one, I think, to meet the aliens and get to chat with the creature that emerges. How much do we want to talk? I don't want to spoil anything for our audience. Do we want to talk about kind of everything that goes past?
I think we have to talk about the alien, right?
Yes.
They're the worst, right?
They are. Yeah.
Full spoilers.
Oh, I think, Ben becomes the. Well, I mean, we are Ben throughout the movie. Like we're seeing it through his eyes and kind of experiencing it, and then his confusion and disappointment, and just kind of just eventually just accepting that this is how things are, was me during this last third of the film. Like this final act is just so disillusioning. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like it builds, to this thing, to getting there, to being there. And then this, I mean, Ben is super disappointed and let down.
There's a line in the film, Easy A, which is kind of a spoof of a different genre of 80s films, where they talk about having unnecessary music numbers. And I definitely felt for like about 5 minutes of this film here at the end where they all regather. There's two aliens, it turns out. Pretty obviously one is like a boy and like one is a girl, and they kind of are talking in TV cultural references, which they have absorbed again from pretty 50s and 60s television, it seems like, in these like old stand-up comedy acts and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the doctor or Robert Picardo playing the male alien.
I don't know if I ever caught the name. Yeah.
His name is Whack.
And he does like a tight five for no reason, just like he just starts doing stand-up comedy, and I was so confused. And
exactly. I do feel like we need to pause a moment and just talk about these alien costumes for a second. They are surprisingly flexible for how rubbery and alternately green or purple and just bizarre they look. Very kind of like shiny plastic, but also like
they're
a
very
bug
wet.
with like a lot of weird hands.
They look very wet, that's for sure. They look wet, and their hands, well, they can't really use their hands because at some point there's a hand exchange there, and you could tell they couldn't bend their fingers, but they have like giant suction cups at the end of their fingers.
Yeah. They got a surprising amount of mobility out of these weird alien costume suits, but
I guess Jim Henson wasn't available for this.
Yeah, right. Sadly,
it's a joke though, right? Like you were expecting maybe something interesting or at least scary or something. I don't know, and then to have it be this completely slapstick alien with this terrible costume. I don't know. It seems like I don't know what they were trying to say. I guess that
Yes.
pop culture is low art or something, and that these aliens have absorbed it, and that's funny. I don't know.
Or that they go to space expecting to see this kind of omnipotent or some kind of amazing being, but they're just it's just kind of reflecting ourselves back at us.
Suffice to say, if you are expecting a film about the wonder of alien civilization in space, perhaps do not pick this one up, which I am sorry to tell you so late into this episode. But suffice to say, it was hit us all at the same time as we were watching it. So, some slapstick continues. There's some conversation. There's a very odd romantic element between Nika, I think is the girl alien's name.
I think it's
Wolfgang. Neek, that's right. And the Wolfgang's character, which is all sort of resolved, with kind of this somewhat bittersweet moment where they're like, why did you never come to Earth? We're cool. Clearly you like our pop culture. And like it plays a montage of like all of these aliens being killed in films, which was actually kind of a fairly somber note. Which
that was
is then
a very powerful moment for this movie.
Yeah.
I wish it wasn't all from the 50s though. Like I wish they had like a scene from Alien, like wasn't that 1980? So that was already out there. Like how about that Alien? Like we had a reason to shoot that one. But again, it's just all this kind of campy.
Yeah.
What's the word for that kind of 50s sci-fi? Pulp,
kind of like
kind
Pulp
of sci-fi?
Fiction sci-fi, the golden age sci-fi.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say hope punk or something like that, or no? I
No.
thought there was something. No.
Is hope punk a thing?
Yeah, it's a newer subgenre.
It's a newer thing.
Yeah, that sort of it first rose up kind of in I think 2016, 2017, kind of as opposing to grimdark. Hope punk is like books that are about optimism in scientific and fantasy settings and trying in spite of the darkness, essentially. But this is a tangent again because it's not relevant to this film.
Explorers is not hope punk, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's dark. It's definitely not dark. It's not scary. It's it's got a more of a hopeful tone to it. These guys were just curious about us, so.
I would say this film lacks a lot of the heavier themes that both grimdark and hope punk deal with in different ways.
Mm-hmm. True.
But this emotional moment is somewhat undercut by the arrival of the space pirates, which is just a bigger spaceship which sucks in this other spaceship. And they're all sort of making their way back to the spaceship, and Ben's like, no, we'll fight him. And Darren's like, we'll punch him in the face. We'll kick their butts. And the aliens are like, no, just go home. We'll deal with it. And you start to get the sense that perhaps something is not exactly as it seems when this giant, even worse alien costume enters the scene. It is easily like 12 feet tall, and it has hands coming out of its head that are waving around.
Hands.
And so many hands. I don't know why. But it's essentially it's a little hard to tell at first, but it becomes fairly clear that this is a bigger sized alien of what we've got going on with our friends Meek and what did you say the gentleman's name was?
Whack.
Whack, that's right. Whack and Meek. There's a conversation that ensues, or some bellowing from the tall alien, and the smaller aliens are talk back. And eventually it comes out that the big twist of this film is in fact that the people reaching out from outer space to these young kids were another set of young kids themselves who had stolen their dad's spaceship to get here.
Yep.
I would say this is arguably the biggest reveal in the entire film, besides the aliens themselves.
For what it's worth, this is what we've been waiting for. So.
It's clear that he is upset both about the spaceship being stolen and about, I think, Wolfgang flirting with his daughter Neek. Anyway, suffice to say, they are given kind of a memento of their time there, which is like this glowing, or not glowing, this clear chunk of glass on a string?
I think it's glowing. I think it has a glow to it.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
But they give it to them and says, this is the stuff dreams are made of, because they're still mostly just talking in pop culture references. And then, like, smash cut, they're leaving, and the dad alien gets angry, and then suddenly we're outside the spaceship and they're going home. There's sort of this montage of them traveling home and Ben, like, reflecting over the experience and kind of getting over his disappointment and being like, hey, that was actually pretty cool after all. Then they're back on Earth.
They have a little bit of a malfunction, I think, and they land in the
That's
lake.
right. For reasons that, again, are never fully explained, their spaceship promptly stops working above the river near their house.
Maybe the kid aliens turned off the machine that was powering it.
Exactly, something like that.
And inexplicably, Lori, the crush, has a dream that they crash in the lake. So she gets up, gets dressed, and goes down there.
Yes. But only to watch from afar. The boys essentially make their way out. They're waiting for contact. It cuts to a scene the next day where they're all under this tree where they did their initial outdoor experiments. And
I know. And did you see Wolfgang's double-breasted overcoat? I know. Oh my gosh! Now that's a coat.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, that's the best costume in this entire film.
And just, you know, to go along the clothes a little bit, I have to mention he has like kind of like a junior mullet, not like a full mullet, but kind of a junior mullet.
Mm-hmm.
And he's wearing a members only jacket, which you guys probably don't know this, but at that time, that was the height of cool. If you had a members only jacket, you made it. That was pretty, yeah. So, I mean, I don't think he was one of the cool kids, but he definitely dressed like the cool kids did when I was in school. Like, he had the little mullet thing going on. He had his members only jacket. But yeah, Wolfgang's coat, man, that was the pièce de résistance.
Yes, definitely. It definitely lent a much more secret agent air to this whole like last bit of the film, which I didn't really understand, but seems super in character for Wolfgang. So then they're like, oh, they'll never contact us. And then they go to school. Lori makes contact with Ben by sending him a note in class that mentions that she knows he went on a trip to outer space, which is, you know, they're connecting. And then the amulet or the token they received starts glowing in the middle of the class, and we are suddenly in another dream sequence where they're seeing an even more complex circuit than they did at the very beginning of the film, and they're like,
so they just all fall asleep in class? Is that
yes,
what happened?
Yeah, that's what I was.
And then they all just started soaring around in the clouds, and like while they were just heads down on their desks. That was really weird jump cut.
Yeah,
that was so weird. Yeah.
Again, this movie was never finished, so we can chalk it up to that.
Suffice to say, the film ends with a very Ben and Lori share a kiss in the clouds. There's kind of this whole sequence where they're like, what does it mean? And they're like, well, let's find out. And then it fades. It doesn't really fade to the credits, but transitions to the credits.
They were leaving it open for a sequel? Or...
Yeah, or just kind of giving you hopeful ideas that they do reconnect with their friends in space after all.
Well, you know, something I was listening to a podcast where they were discussing this movie, and I guess River Phoenix really wanted to play Darren's character. That's what the character that he wanted to play. Did you know that, Brendan? I don't know if you came upon that on your studies.
I didn't find that, no.
He was really embarrassed to be playing the nerd. He didn't like it.
He did a great job, though.
I know he did, and also
he rocked those glasses. But I guess he took them off between shoots because he just didn't want to be in front of the girls on set wearing glasses. Poor guy.
And they also both River Phoenix and Ethan Hawke. They both had a crush on the actress that played Lori Swenson. So there was like a love triangle going on behind the scenes.
Oh my gosh. So much cast drama.
Well, you don't get a lot of that.
No.
None of that comes through because there's a lot of nothing coming through.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, do you want to? Should we give our final takes on it? Do you want to do some kind of review system? Just listening to us talk about the movie, what jumped out at me was the alien human hand, alien antenna. So out of 5 human hand alien antennas, what would you give this movie, Jen, and why?
Let's see. I think I would give it a 3.5. You know, I mean, if I'd never seen this as a kid, I'd probably give it a lower score, but it has a lot of nostalgia for me. So, yeah, I think I saw this movie just at the edge. Like if it would have came out a year later, I think I would have been too cool to watch it. But I was still innocent enough to enjoy it when it came out. I think I was like maybe 12 or 13 when it came out. So I'll give it 3.5. What did you say? A human hand, alien antennas?
And alien antennas.
So 3.5 for me. Yeah, I'll give it 3.5.
Okay. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Gosh, I'm kind of struggling here. I think I also have to give it 3 alien antenna hands. I really
picked a good rating system.
So I would give it 3 hand antenna, and I would say overall pretty solid story. I feel for me personally, it is rescued by their awesome spaceship and just how much I adored every single side character in this piece, like the mouse, the Mueller family. We didn't even talk about the gum chewing dog, but I enjoyed all of that a great deal.
Don't give a dog gum, no.
One more reason to go watch the film.
These kids are so reckless.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to give it 2 human hand, alien antennas.
You can't even say it.
And I wanted to give it more, and I was enjoying it for the most part, especially the first 2/3. I was kind of like, yeah, if they just like wrap this up in a great way, this will be I can ignore that this is just like there's all these plot holes. And I really enjoyed the casting of the 3 boys. I thought they did a great job, and especially since this is their first movie, they nailed whatever character traits they were trying to go for, and I really liked that the kind of quiet, deep voiced kid who just seemed way older than he should have been. But yeah, I thought that was good, but then there was no stakes, and then they get into space, and it all falls apart for me. So I don't know. It was kind of disappointing when I finished up. I just stopped taking notes as soon as the alien did its jump scare.
Yeah.
I was like, oh boy, all right. I'll remember that it's all terrible from here on out.
Oh boy.
Sounds pretty harsh. Maybe it shouldn't have been that harsh, but I like all the 80s kind of all the details that they put into the lab and into the different scenes, especially throughout the beginning and middle part of the movie.
You gotta wonder what the movie would have been if the director would have been able to do, movie that he had envisioned. Hopefully the end would have been tighter. I mean, the first 3/4 of the movie are really solid. I think are really solid. It's definitely the end is very disappointing. It's just a big letdown. The aliens are way too goofy. The one that Robert Picardo plays, which is Whack, that shtick that he has gets old like super fast.
Yeah.
He just talks in, game show host and stand up, thing that he does. It's just gets kind of irritating, and they don't find out anything.
Do you remember liking that as a kid?
Yeah. I was going to ask, what did you guys think of this when you were? Because I didn't watch it before, as a kid, but you had.
No, Brendan hasn't seen it. I was the only one that had seen it, and I enjoyed it. I don't remember having any profound feelings about it. I wasn't, obsessed with it like on the level of Star Wars. I just remember enjoying it, and so much so that when my kids were the age that they could watch it, I was like, oh, this is a good, wholesome, family movie that's got a lot of stuff I like, and I remember enjoying it. And my daughter actually, get this, okay, hated the first part of the movie, thought it was super boring. And the only thing she liked was that girl alien. She just loved that. Yeah, that was the thing that she liked. And then my son he did not like it at all. He just thought it was super boring. They thought it was boring and goofy and not interesting at all. So they didn't enjoy it. It wasn't the family favorite that I hoped it would be. But yeah, I liked it when I was a kid. I mean, I lived out in the country. We had 3 channels. I didn't have a lot to compare it to as far as just entertainment. So maybe that is part of it. But I
I
liked
was
it.
definitely surprised, in my own watching, that when we got to the 1 hour mark, they still hadn't gone into space yet. I do remember wondering um, when the exploration bit was going to start, because when I listened to the first half of this podcast and you guys were describing it to me, I definitely had this notion that this film was going to be like, oh, in some sort of surprising twist way, they build a spaceship in their garage, and then most of the film is spent exploring space, because that's what the film is titled, Explorers. And I guess I sort of wondered if it would be. I'm trying to think of like a good corollary for it, but something like Baron Munchausen's Adventures, or another one of those, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Any of the things where kind of they hop through a bunch of different scenes in either history or space or something like that. That was kind of what I was expecting from this film.
I think the pacing was off. Definitely the pacing was very strange in the movie. Like some of it was really interesting and it was just going, and then some of it was just kind of boring and in parts. I don't know. The pacing was a little strange, and I think it shows that, like what you said, they don't even get to space until an hour into the film. So, and then that's just over rather quickly. And
this movie, on IMDb, they compare it to Flight of the Navigator, which I recently watched, and I had noticed the exact same kind of thing. Like, it takes so long before he actually gets into the spaceship and starts going around. So I was wondering, like, if that maybe was a thing for some of these movies, is like, yeah, everyone's waiting for them to get to that part of the movie, but they just, once they're there, they don't have enough to do, or maybe the effects are too expensive or something. But like, so they just, it's such a shorter part of the film than you'd want or think it would be. So, oh, yeah, it would have been fun if they had spent the majority of the film in space, but they did.
I wonder if the footage exists that still exists, that they could maybe make a director's cut of this, or if anyone would care if they did.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone will go back and do that.
I was trying to imagine what a remake of this would look like. I feel like it would lose something if it came to, like, I feel as though if the special effects were better, it would lose something almost, because not so much in the alien department, they can fix that if they want, but just the ragtag spaceship and the Tron circuitry. As someone who did not watch this in theaters, I kind of find it more charming than anything else, because I'm not expecting the special effects to be a whole ton better, and I feel like if it was really like slick 21st century effects, it might lose some of the charm.
I
but
agree.
It could be
yeah,
a fun remake for like a kid's summer blockbuster,
I don't know how good like remakes of all these adolescent 80 adventure movies would be. Like they've been talk about doing Goonies again, and that would ruin it. I don't know. I think they're kind of products of the 80s and where they were in that time and the way people thought, and then they should stay that way. And if we need to make something similar, we should just make a new thing. But that's my opinion.
I think that's actually probably the best take. I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, although, I don't know why if they are going to remake movies, they should remake ones like this that didn't do well, or that weren't finished, instead of remaking movies that were like practically perfect already and don't need to be remade.
Yeah.
A lot of people have opinions on remakes. I think most people don't want them, but they go watch them anyway, so they make money, so then they keep making them.
Right. Well, I don't think that Explorers would have that kind of capital, or name recognition and all that stuff to kind of bring more people in the theater. So let's just say we're going to leave it in 1985.
That sounds good to me.
And wrap this up. So there you have it. We watched Explorers. We talked about it. Lackluster reviews maybe, but still fun for portions of it. So worth a view if you like that kind of thing. Any closing remarks? Anything you want to plug, Elizabeth?
No.
Jen, what do you got going on in your life right now?
Oh, I'm walking the dog a lot. You could see me out on the street if you happen by. I'm making lists for our Bibliocommons account, @bro_sci-fi fantasy collective.
Check them out. We do have an upcoming list that is pretty thematically tied, I would say, to this. So if you're looking for more kind of space adventure or kind of younger sci-fi. Check it out.
Yes.
Excellent. So if you haven't already, follow the Hillsborough Library on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And we'll be back hopefully next month with some new fun kind of podcast episode for you all.
Yes.
So,
Yay!
so long.
Bye-bye.
Bye.